Alrighty, good evening, everybody. Good evening. Yeah, my name is Daniel Bear, and I'm an event facilitator here with McNally Robinson Booksellers. And before I begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are on Treaty 1 territory. The territory is the traditional territories to the Anishinaabe, Aninawak, Anishinaabe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. In addition, McNally Robinson Booksellers itself rests on the land once occupied by the Métis community of Roostertown. And of course, we are gathered here today to celebrate the Winnipeg launch of the latest installment of Raye Anderson's Roxanne Calloway Mystery series, Had a Great Fall. And we're very grateful to Signature Editions for publishing the book and making this evening a possibility. And we are very pleased to have both Doug Whiteway and Marjorie Poor here to host for us. So in just a moment, Raye will be up to read a selection from her latest book before joining Doug and Marjorie in conversation. And following that, there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions. So if you are here today and you do have a question, raise your hand a little bit high for me to see, and I'll come by with this wireless microphone just to ensure that you're heard on today's live stream, just for the cameras and those watching at home. And then I will be back at the end just to go over the signing procedure, just for the table to my right. But now I have the pleasure of introducing tonight's guests. So our host, Doug Whiteway, has been working and playing with words for more than 4 decades. He has worked as a writer and editor for newspapers, including the Winnipeg Free Press, and magazines, including Canada's History, formerly The Beaver, and for various book publishers. Under the nom de plume C.C. Benison, he is the author of 9 crime novels. And Marjorie Poor, as well, is an editor of the provincial government. She's also the editor of Prairie Books Now and a fiction editor at Prairie Fire. Her poems have appeared in Vallum, CB2, and Prairie Fire, and her chapbook, Santos, Voices That Haunt Us, was published by Jack Pine Press in 2024. And our special guest, Raye Anderson, is a Scots-Canadian who now calls Manitoba's Interlake home. She has published 5 books in the Roxanne Calloway Mystery series and 1 for the Elspeth Laird Mystery series. Her first novel, And We Shall Have Snow, was shortlisted for the CWC Best Crime First Novel and the Willa Literary Award for Original Softcover Fiction. Her novel, The Dead Shall Inherit, was shortlisted for the 2025 CWC Whodunit Award. And now, here to read a selection from Had a Great Fall, please join me in welcoming Raye Anderson.
Hello. Thank you all for coming out. And thanks to McNally's for doing this. And also thanks to Doug and to Marjorie for coming and being my interviewers. Doug's been feeling unwell, so Marjorie is here in case he runs out of his voice halfway through this. And she'll also step in with any questions she thinks of that could be really worth asking me. Anyway, this is the 5th book in the Roxanne Calloway series, right? So it's just set in the Interlake. And in the first chapter, 2 men, one of whom is a recent immigrant from the Ukraine, are driving down a road late one Sunday night, and they decide to go and they pass a field of sunflowers. And Vasily, the Ukrainian guy, is quite homesick when he sees them. So they decide to go in and take some photographs. And once they get there, they discover that there's a Navy track that's been bashed through the sunflowers. And one of them is called Mike McBain. Mike shows up in a lot of these books. He's the brother of Izzy McBain, who has been Roxanne Calloway's kind of sidekick in some of these books. And Izzy is also in the RCMP, like Roxanne. But Mike kind of gets up to mischief. He's kind of the naughty brother whom everybody likes, but he gets up to things that he shouldn't. So he goes charging off down this avenue between the sunflowers, and they find a dead body. So we're going to meet this at the point where Rob Marsden, who is a sergeant in the Major Crimes Unit, has been sent out to investigate late that night. So Rob gets there and he's not pleased at all to be there. He did not want to have to drive out to the Interlake on Sunday night to look at somebody who's been shot in the middle of a sunflower patch. Because he would rather be close to the real action and be over at, he's just done some stuff around headquarters. He really wants to be at headquarters. He does not want to be over the boonies. Okay. Rob is actually classic, where he looks like the perfect Mountie. He's had his photograph taken for press purposes. He's so good looking. And he looks great in the serge and the red, you know, all that stuff, and the hat. But he, no, I'm not going to say that. As Rob Marsden turned the corner onto the north side of the sunflower field, he wished that IDENT, the RCMP's forensic identification unit, was already there. They'd be able to rig proper lighting. It was dark out, not a sign of a moon, only an orange glow in the sky from the street lights in Cullen Village, 6 kilometers further north. An occasional big star and a big blinking moving satellite up above. The local detachment had managed to install a single light at the entrance to the track that led into the rows of plants. Another light positioned halfway down the path was the only other source of illumination. The rest was shadowy, the towering sunflowers leaning in like old women listening. Wooden planks had been laid down so the police could walk without damaging too much evidence. It made for precarious walking, especially with plastic booties on. He picked his way along them. Up ahead, another light illuminated the spot where the body lay, guarded by a uniformed constable who looked young enough to be straight out of the depot, the RCMP's training facility in Regina. A man in corporal's uniform was bending over the body. He wore a turban. That must be Corporal Anand, temporarily in charge of the Fiskar Bay detachment, while their regular sergeant was off on maternity leave. East Indian by the look of him, another diversity hire getting shunted up the ranks, Marsden suspected. Stand back, Corporal, he ordered. I'll take charge of this now. IDENT will be here shortly and they'll arrange for the body to be picked up. Raye Anderson stood up and stretched, showing no sign of leaving. The young constable stood watching, his hands behind his back. This man hasn't been here more than a day, the corporal reported. Rob Marsden squatted down beside the body, making his own inspection. He might as well hear what the guy had to say while he waited for forensics to arrive, so he let him talk. We haven't found any ID on the body. No wallet, no phone. This isn't anyone we recognize. It looks like he was shot here. A shotgun blast would do that much damage, and death would have been instant. We haven't found a gun, so it doesn't look like this is a self-inflicted wound. Not suicide, maybe a hunting accident? Marsden eyeballed the body. How would he have got in here? There's no other vehicle parked nearby. Raye Anderson pointed along the canyon of sunflowers, ghostly in the shadowy light. The tire tracks looked like they'd been made by a large-sized quad, but there are also footprints, more than one set. Maybe this man came in on the quad, or else he was on foot. As you said, sir, we'll have to wait until IDENT tells us more. Hey, Ravi! A voice ran out. A woman had appeared at the far end of the track, wearing the same protective boots and gloves as they were. She was waving. A light caught a flash of red hair as she moved forward. Hey, Sarge, how come you're here? Raye Anderson called back a greeting. Izzy McBain texted me, said her brother Mike and someone he works with found a body over here. The baby's asleep and Matt's home, so I came in case you needed a hand. Rob Marsden watched the dark silhouette approach. This had to be Roxanne Calloway, the sergeant in charge of the Fiskar Bay detachment when she wasn't taking time off to have babies. She'd been a member of the major crimes unit back in the day, he'd been told, but wasn't she on maternity leave? Not a working member of the force right now? You don't need to be here, Sergeant, he called to her. We've got this all under control. But Roxanne kept walking toward them. Mike's gone home already, she asked as she got hold of her. Are you Sergeant Marsden? Who had told her who he was? Most likely the woman constable out on the roadside. That must be who had given her the gloves and foot covering. Calloway moved into the light in the clearing where the body lay. Then she stopped. She stared as did, her head tilting first to one side, then the other, like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. I know who that is, she said. He's Cooper Jenkins. What's he doing here dead? Who? Asked Raye Anderson. He was a detective sergeant with the City Police. I worked with him on a case about 5 years ago. This guy saved my life. Raye Anderson knew that story. Roxanne had been accosted by a killer years before, in the days when she worked for the Major Crimes Unit. It had happened in a snowstorm in Winnipeg. Her throat had been cut. She still bore a faint scar under her chin and up to her ear, and half her earlobe was missing. A city cop had arrived in time to knock out her attacker with a baseball bat and call for help. This must be the same guy. She watched Roxanne drop on one knee beside the head of her old colleague, take off her glove and reach out to close his eyes. You can't touch that body, Rob Marsden objected. Don't worry. Roxanne straightened up and faced him. I'll tell Dave Kovac that I did it. When he gets here, he'll understand. Kovac ran the IDENT unit for this area. Marsden got the message. She was making it clear that she knew him and he was supposed to be impressed. Like she had equal status here with him. She didn't. Not if she was off on mat leave. She was still talking. Coop must be retired now. I've lost touch with him. We swapped Christmas cards for a couple of years and that was it. He was going to quit the police around then. He was talking about joining up with some old buddies who'd set themselves up in business as private investigators after they'd quit the police. If he was out here investigating a case, that could explain why he's lying here, dead. There.
And now it's 20 questions.
I know you need a mic.
Oh,
Here we go.
There, I got my.
Perfect.
Okay,
hello, coming Berlin.
I'm here.
Let's talk about Roxanne a bit. She's on mat leave
She is.
and she shouldn't be involved in a case, and yet somehow she gets involved.
Well, Roxanne's baby. Roxanne lives with Matt Stavros, who's also been in all of the books. And the baby is 8 months old. At the end of the last book, she was just pregnant. So, and the baby, it's going to be another 6 to 8 weeks before she gets back on the job. And it's the end of the summer, and all the fun of summer is over, and now she's stuck at home by herself with the baby, and she's restless. She wants to get back to work, so part of this book was about exploring that business of how you actually get back to work when you've got a baby. And very little in the way of daycare, which is something that happens everywhere and certainly happens in the Interlake. I mean, you can't get on lists for, you know. So part of it is that she is really eager to get back to work. She hasn't been working, and she has this thing. In one of the books, they talk about her. Well, Coop Jenkins in the second. Coop was in the second book. Coop called her Foxy Roxy because she tended to sniff things out. She just couldn't leave things alone. When something like this came up, she couldn't leave it alone. So she's in this situation really where she's off work, but the body is 5 minutes from home, and the body is Coop Jenkins, who saved her life. I mean, how is she not going to get involved?
Right.
Yeah. She can't leave it alone.
Well, then it's a work-life balance for her. But I'm wondering if you had picked a man as your protagonist, would we have the same issues?
Wouldn't be the same story at all. It'd be a totally different book.
In fact, then I presume that's why you decided when you started this whole series to have a female detective. Did you explore some of those issues, or did you think about in the very beginning, who shall be my detective? Male, female?
Doug, I wasn't thinking about that when I started. When I started the first book, I had I thought I had a book club in the book, and I wanted it to be about them. And I thought all the time that I was writing it that it was about the book club, and how they got themselves involved into something they shouldn't be messing about with, and get themselves into a bit of trouble doing it. So that was part of what, and I'm really interested in how women are perceived in the workforce and all that kind of stuff. So when I got to chapter 5 of the first book, I suddenly realized I needed a call. and I knew nothing about the RCMP, and that was going to be a problem. So finding out about the RCMP has been something, but I never thought for a second of anything other than it being a woman.
Okay.
And because I'm writing from a female perspective. And the funny thing is that Roxanne's really grown on me as the books have progressed. I mean, to me, she's become much more interesting as I go through the books. The first one, she basically, as I wrote the book, I began to realize just how useful she was, because she can go in and ask all the right questions, and she can tap into the right sources of information. And she also, she sets off alarm bells. So I mean, if you live in a small village, and an RCMP sergeant goes banging on somebody's door, it's not long before everybody knows all about it, and they're all figuring out what it's doing, and most of it's wrong, and that's kind of fun to write about. So yeah.
Well, was she modeled on anyone in particular, or did she sort of slowly evolve from the kernel of Helena?
No, she wasn't. She didn't start off as Roxanne Calloway. She started off as someone called Madeline Lamont. And Madeline,
sounds like a stripper, actually.
No, she wasn't. She was French Canadian.
Oh.
She came to the Boniface, and she had dark curly hair, and she was kind of feisty. And I was quite happy with Madeline Lamont until I read a Louise Penny book, and she has a Madeline.
Oh,
There's a Madeline that's in La Sûreté, and I thought, I can't do this. I can't have a Madeline. So I kept trying to think of another name for her, and I kept thinking of French Canadian names. And then, I mean, the way it happens, right? So I woke up in the middle of the night, and there was Roxanne Calloway, and I had no idea where the name came from. I don't know any Roxannes. I don't know anyone called Calloway, and she wasn't little, curly haired, dark haired. She came from Saskatchewan, and she had red hair, and she was skinny.
Okay.
And there she was. So
out of thin air.
Yeah, out of thin air.
Roxanne's a great name. It's kind of a strong name, as opposed. I don't insult the Madeleines in the old. Roxanne just sounds, vigorous.
Well, yeah. And it kind of suits her. I mean, the name works for her, because she's dogged, and she's persistent. And once she has an idea in her head that she's going to pursue it, she's going to pursue it, right? So there's something kind of slightly edgy, but actually really quite solid about Roxanne. Yeah.
Well, I was thinking when you mentioned your first book,
Mm-hmm.
I was suddenly reminded of Thursday Murder Club. It's almost like you had a variation of it there. And that was before Osmond published his first ones, I think.
Well, that's really funny, because I mean, there was a book club, and I had a book club at the time. And I started, I mean, I didn't know what I was doing when I wrote the first book. I was just seeing if I could write a book. And I started writing the first chapter just as a writing exercise. And then I kind of went, oh, wow, I can't think I know how to do this. And so I carried on. And my little book club was just a really interesting source of how a group of women would get together. And I mean, the book club that I belonged to spent about half an hour talking about the books and a lot of time eating food and talking about everything.
And drinking wine.
No, we didn't actually. We didn't drink much wine. There's a member of the book club here, and she's smiling at me right now. And anyway, so the book club was there. But the other thing that's really interesting is that in that first book, it starts off with a body that's been dismembered and put in a dump, right? And I had I mean, it's so interesting that, you know, that has come up as an actual real fact in people's lives. And it was a total piece of fiction that I just thought.
Well, yeah, I was interested in the kernel of what starts a book. I didn't want to go back to the first one necessarily, but was that sort of an early image, or did that come later and was put into the front?
I think I always need a place.
Yeah.
I think I need to know. Well, this one, the sunflowers. I was driving just 2 Septembers ago. I was driving down the road from Gimli to Selkirk, and I passed a sunflower field. And that year, the sunflowers were really big. They're twice the size that they are this year. And so there were these grand sunflowers in ranks. And they were really eye-catching. I thought, well, that's interesting. And then I passed another one, and then I thought, oh wow, you know, it'd be interesting to put a body there. So then by the time I got to Selkirk, I had to start the book. Right? So yeah, so and I mean, it was the same. It's been the same with all of the books. They've all started with a place. I know where the place is, and then I know where the body is. If I know where the body and the place is, and I can start the book.
Okay. So every Genesis is that. I'm saying aren't they all outdoors? Is one well, the first one is, and
the first one, the body's in the dump. The second one, he's in the car. Okay. And that one came about because I knew that it's the one that's set in the theatre district here, and so it was going to be in the city, and I had an RCMP cop as my sleuth. So, and I had a friend who was a sergeant with the RCMP, who an inspector with the city police. And I said to him, what do I do? And he said, you put the body outside of town. So I thought, oh, Lockport. I happened to be down near Lockport. I thought, oh, that'd be a great place to kind of put a car with a body. But the thing is, all of those questions have to lead somewhere. So they all have to kind of lead to questions, right? How on earth does a car end up at Lockport abandoned with a body in it? You know, when the guy's probably been killed in the city. So that kind of took me off. It's the same with this one. This one, it's kind of the whole idea of what is Coop Jenkins doing out in the Interlake? Is he a PI? If he's a PI, what's he investigating? How does that link in? So yeah, it just, the minute I've got that, then I've got somewhere to go with the story. Yeah.
Well, yeah, to me, it's always an endless bunch of problem solving. But one small problem, and you have to figure that out.
And it leads to the next problem.
The next problem. But at least you can control.
Yeah.
Not like real life where you have problems.
I know. It's kind of good. And at the end, if it doesn't work, you can go back and fix it.
That's true, not like life. I think you're probably a pantser, not a planner.
I am totally a pantser. So the pantser, there's this idea in crime fiction that basically there's crime fiction writers who plot the whole thing out and who know exactly what it is and then sit down and write the book. So and they'll have rooms with post-it notes all over or graphs or everything, right? The whole thing's mapped out before they ever begin. I don't. I have no idea where I'm going when I start. I just know that there's a body in the field and there's a couple of questions that need to be answered. So I take it from there, and then it all just kind of, it just grows from there. It's kind of like, it's like a spider web. It just kind of, it all links together, and then I end up with this big spider web, and then I have to kind of figure out the path through.
Yeah. Really, you never have to backtrack or completely rewrite something because you realized you've missed some title thing? Or?
No, but I wanted, well, first book, I had a whole storyline, and I have, before Doug ever reads the book, it goes to a couple of what we call beta readers. So they read an early draft of it, and part of their role is to kind of let me know what is ringing true and what isn't. And one of them is really good at that. And she said, as it was getting to the end of my storyline, I'm not sure that I believe this.
Oh.
And I have a tendency to go a little bit over the top now and then, and she'll nail me on it. And at that point, I thought about it for a while, and then I thought it actually needs to be a different storyline. So I had to go back and unpick it all the way through.
Was that this latest one or a
No,
previous?
the first one.
Well, the first one.
First
Okay.
book. It's never happened again.
Well, you learn by doing.
Now I know that if a little voice in the back of my head is saying, "Are you sure?" Then pay attention.
Any of your beta readers in the room?
No.
Oh.
No, there's nothing in Winnipeg. One is I have a daughter who's one of my beta readers, and she's in England, and the other one's in Toronto.
Oh, okay. Well, Roxanne, should I ask what's next for her? You've done 5, but one of them was set in Winnipeg, which is a bit of an anomaly.
It was an anomaly, and it was, and I mean, the books kind of follow the seasons, right?
Yes.
And so the Winnipeg one was the fall one, and I didn't do, and because it was the beginning of the season, and it was October, right? And so I'd never done one that was in the Interlake in the fall, and then so I thought, well, and then the idea of the Had a Great Fall, that title popped in my head, and it was. And I thought of all the ways that you can think of the word fall, right? Oh, it lends itself to so many, people fall out with each other, or they fall in love with each other, or they fall flat in their faces, or they fall down dead, or da 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 da. So I did a fall book, and I really wondered if that was it. I really wondered if that's. But the funny thing is that sometimes I get to the end of a book and I know where the next one's going, and I know where I want to take it, and I know where Roxanne 6 is going.
Okay.
So, but I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to say a thing.
But it would be sort of the B story. It's her personal life is kind of what's taking you to 6. Something happens.
Something
in
happens.
5.
Well, yeah.
Which I won't reveal.
But you won't reveal. I mean, a lot of it's about that business of trying to juggle motherhood and a baby and all of that, especially in a business that is not set up for that at all. I mean, how do you deal with irregular hours and things that suddenly call you out in the middle of the night and all of that when you've got an 8-month-old baby? So there's that, but there's also the fact that it affects her relationships with other people, and it affects her relationship with the job. I mean, how much is she prepared to give up? How much she actually opted to go out to the Interlake and run the Fiskar Bay detachment because of that incident where she almost died. And she has another child. She has a little boy. She has a little boy when we first meet her. She's widowed. Her husband was killed it was an RCMP person who was shot. So she's an RCMP widow, and she goes and takes this job and gives up working for the major crimes unit because she feels she needs to make sure she lives, that she doesn't get into trouble, that she doesn't land herself in something really, really dangerous, and that really should be safer behind a desk. And a station sergeant job, a detachment job, gives her that. So most of the time she's really, she's in the office managing things, and she's not satisfied with that. She's just not satisfied with it. Roxanne's the kind of person that likes to be out and about and doing, and
of course people keep getting murdered in her community.
And people somehow or other people just die in her vicinity, and she just gets drawn into finding out what happened.
Well, I think that's the pleasure of setting in small communities.
Oh yeah.
The secrets and the.
Oh, the small towns. Yeah, that's another thing too. I mean, it's kind of thing in crime fiction, right? That you put it into a small place, so you've got a limited number. Although you can end up with a lot of characters. I tend to have about 5 storylines going by the time it's built.
Yeah.
So it's so that's 5 groups of people, right? So it's quite a lot of characters. But even so, it's still an enclosed society. And when I did the one in the city, I deliberately chose the theatre, partly because I'd worked in theatre and I knew theatre and I knew how they work. I knew how a theatre company works. But it gave me a kind of enclosed society. It's a little closed circle of people who know each other very well. So it limits the choices that you have moving forward, and that's a good thing.
So Roxanne's staying in the internet for the time being, or?
I'm not telling
Oh,
you.
you're not
Doug.
telling me.
You have to wait. You have to wait. I don't know. I mean, I just know where the body is.
That's always the start, isn't it?
I actually don't know. You know what? There's actually a big question I have to make my mind up about before I start Roxanne 6. But before I do Roxanne 6, there's Elspeth 2. I mean, yeah.
I was going to ask about that too.
Yeah. Elspeth is my Scottish character. Well, she's not Scottish, she's Canadian. But she inherited a house in Scotland and she went back to this island called Sola, which doesn't exist except in my imagination. And it's, but I know where it's situated in the Scottish Hebrides. And so I got to the end of Elspeth last year, and I have a first draft of Elspeth 2. So I know how that story works now. Yeah.
So how would you see it? One each other?
I don't know. It seems an odd way to work, right? Because because you guys, you get to the end of the story, and the next one needs to be the same kind of characters, right? And I'm leapfrogging right now. It's great for me right now because right now, the Detachment, which is the Scottish book, is still out there doing things. I mean, it's in thin air, and there's groups that are meeting. There's book clubs that meet and talk about it. So that book's still very active. And then there's this new one. So it keeps the 2 separate in my head easily, which I'm not sure. Well, have you ever run into this?
What, doing 2?
You know, how 2 books that are kind of beginning to run up against each other?
Yeah, I think about it, but I don't like to concentrate on one. Like I keep thinking, well, I could do this in the morning and that in the afternoon, but I haven't got the energy.
Well, it's that business of kind of you go in to talk about one book, but yeah, and if it's the Scottish book or the Roxanne book, I can keep them separate in my head. But if it was 2 Roxanne books that were very close to each other, I might suddenly find myself talking about the wrong book, right? Don't want to do that.
Actually, maybe you're gonna have Roxanne make a little side trip to Scotland, or you're, I don't know, blend them somehow.
I don't think so. I don't think I want to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that was you. Oh,
But I was just thinking, like, when you were talking about the small town and all the characters and everything, it seemed to me in this book, there was not as much of the local gossip. Like, she used to get a lot of her information from her neighbors and stuff. And it seemed that she wasn't getting quite as much this time. I was just wondering if she's just feeling more like they're her friends rather than her sources or something.
They're more her friends and they're her neighbors. It's more neighborhood stuff than, but she's in a fairly isolated situation because she's living out in the country. Matt Stavros inherited a chunk of land from an aunt of his and built a house there. And it's outside of town. So she's there with the baby. And so being at home with a baby can really isolate you, right? So she is kind of isolated. Mm-hmm. So she runs into people. She goes and picks up eggs from someone and she does a chat. And she goes and picks up vegetables at somebody else's place. And she runs into people and they have people over. But it's not the same as being on the job, where she's right at the center of something that's going on, and it's her business to know what's going on and what people are saying, and therefore, she's much more isolated in this, and that's part of her problem. Part of her problem is that she's looking at another 6 to 8 weeks of that, and she's had enough. Yeah. One of the things that's actually really fun that's happened in this book is that there's characters from the old books that have come up again. And one of them is that, where is she? There's a baby in this book. That the baby is Dee, and Matt Stavros' aunt, the one he inherited it from, was in the first book, and her name was Panda. And I loved Panda, and I really loved writing Panda. And Panda is no longer with us. So it was kind of fun to think, oh wow, the baby's Panda revisited, so I can kind of bring her back.
Okay.
So yeah, she's a baby panda. She's just like Panda. She's loud and big and boisterous and happy, and then the idea that that Coop I knew I wanted to bring Coop Jenkins back because I really liked Coop Jenkins. Having Coop Jenkins with Roxanne, they kind of played off each other really well in the second book. At least I felt I enjoyed working with that. And I really wanted to bring Coop back. And then I had this horrible realization that he was going to be dead. So what was I going to do? But then, this in the middle of this is actually Coop Jenkins' daughter. So in a way of kind of.
Well, she really lifts off the page, and I keep thinking she could have her own series.
I have thought about that.
Yeah.
I have thought about that. I've thought, at the end of it, there's a kind of, there's something going on with her job and who she's acquainted with that has some promise. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking that too, that, well, I don't want to say too much about these.
No, I can't.
Give it away.
It's really difficult, it's really difficult when you're talking about whodunit because there's so much you can't see. It's like when you're doing readings, you have to read from the beginning. You can't go too far in.
The butler did it.
The butler did it, yeah. So, but you've written whodunits, right?
I
Yeah.
Lassie.
Yeah. I mean, so you've written series, right? So
Yeah, 2 short series and a couple of one-offs, standalones, I think they're called.
yeah, because I'm totally astonished that Roxanne's at book 5, right, and that there probably is a book 6, and I don't know when.
It'll probably be a 7 too.
Well, it's tricky, right? Because I think when you get to that rut, is it a rut, right? When you get into that thing where the wheel keeps turning, right? And are you really going to carry on, say, following that same bunch of characters? And are the books becoming really too alike? I mean, I think am I going to start telling the same story? Because I think that trend exists in some series, and you have to be really careful about it. And then
the nice thing about having the other one to alternate with, right?
And that's what I had to do, Marjorie. And I didn't know if I had another book in me. I didn't know if I had another storyline in me. And so I needed to find out if I could do that. So it was really healthy to kind of go away and write about someone else in a different place and then come back to Roxanne. Yeah.
I was thinking of the woman, I can't remember the name, who did the A is for this, B is for that.
Yeah.
She was really, she had to get to 27.
I know, I remember that.
Yeah.
Well, and you had your 12
Yeah.
days.
Yeah, but I thank God. You're dead.
It's one of those dilemmas. I mean, it's interesting how a series really works because basically you've got all these characters and you've got that through line and you can keep following that and it's interesting. The other choice is basically, are you going to keep the character on a real storyline or a real timeline? Yeah. And I chose to do that. So Roxanne's now, the first book I wrote was written on a 2017 timeline. So I'm now on a 2024 timeline. So, she's 8 years on. And so what's happened with her life and that, and I skipped the COVID years. I just hopped right over it. a patter in the office at Fiskar Bay running the detachment. Yeah.
Good thinking.
Yeah. So, yeah, but that whole business of, but then you have the thing, it's really fun to stay with the same characters and, you know, do you really want to take time out and do a standalone and take the risk that it's actually going to work right?
So many choices.
So many choices.
I wonder if it's audience question time.
So audience question time. Yes.
Daniel's
Daniel's
running
going to
the
come.
microphone.
Daniel's coming with the
Run.
microphone.
Oh no, it's dead. We have to fill the air. We can do a sing along.
How long does it take you to write a book?
I'm doing one a year.
Yeah.
But that's kind of fairly common in crime fiction. Because
Well, I was thinking that you reminded me of John Sanford, who writes Virgil Flowers, and then the Lucas Davenport, you know, keep alternating, but
Yeah.
they do know each other. And
yeah,
sometimes
so there's a
appear in each
connection.
other's books.
Because mine are so distinctly different. Different place, different country, different everything, right? Different language. Yeah.
Well, one thing I really enjoy is the fact that it's almost like a red herring that you throw in, that there are other crimes and Roxanne is pursuing those. And sometimes those clues kind of look like they're going to be solved towards the murder, but then sometimes, no, that's just leading us down the garden path.
That's right.
How many crimes do you have to come up with to bury in your books?
Oh, in fact, there's 5 storylines. So one will probably be a kind of domestic, and probably 4 of them will be different crime-related stories, and only one of them a story one. Yeah. But that's the fun part, right? But, yeah.
Well, I'm interested in knowing, hello, Ray.
Hiya.
I'm interested in knowing when you write during the day. Do you write in the evening or during the day? Do you write every day? How many words do you write a day? I'm like, do you write Sunday to Sunday? And yeah, I would just like to know all of that.
Good question.
Thank you, Roxanne.
Oh, yes, I am a Roxanne.
Oh,
Yeah. I write every morning. I mean, I think a lot of people do, right? I get up in the morning and once I've got the coffee, I'm at my desk. And I tell all my friends not to speak to me till 1 o'clock. And I work pretty well. There'll usually be a day in the week I'll take off, but it's pretty well 6 days a week. And I pretty well do 2 chapters a week when I'm doing first draft. So but first draft is, I mean, you can write really fast. At least I can write really fast because I'm not too worried about a first draft being good writing. I just need to hammer down the story. And that requires a fair bit of momentum to keep the stories all going in my head and keep it running. So I'm basically doing about 5,000 words in a week. But I scribble it down in longhand. I have spiral notebooks. Yeah, there's something about that hand connection and my imagination, and I just sit down there and scribble, right? And then I put it into the computer and fix it up, and then I'm ready to move on again, right? So and then what's in the computer actually is the first draft, because the first draft is really me babbling away. So I usually have, so then it's done, then it goes, then I clean it up. Then I send it off to my 2 readers, they give me feedback, I clean it up again. And then the last thing I do before it goes over to Doug is I read it aloud and I print it out, because I find that if it's in print, I'll catch errors that I don't catch if they're on the screen, but if they're on the screen. So I do that, and then if I read it aloud, because it's, I mean, this is a storytelling form, right? This method of writing is really storytelling. And it's very active storytelling. And it, so the idea that it's spoken, that it works, that you ought to be able to hear a voice telling you the story matters to me anyway. So and I catch all kinds of stuff and I do that read through. So overall, yeah, it takes me about a year. But then I'm hopping a bit because I start off on one and I get well close to the end of the first draft in this case in Elspeth 2, and then Doug gets back at me for edits on the one that we're taking to print, which was Roxanne 5. So, and that's how I speak of them, Roxanne 2, Roxanne 5, and Elspeth 2. Yeah.
What reminds me of your theater background, just hopping from one to the other? I mean, it must have been a great help with, say, dialogue, or not?
It's my theatre background's key, I think, to the fact that I write crime fiction. Not that you want to kill anybody, but there's something about the way that the forms work, because it's storytelling and because it's active and because it's action-based and character-based and dialogue-based, and because I've got that background, it kind of comes easily. I mean, I know how to improvise. I mean, I used to teach kids creative drama every Saturday morning. Well, you do that, you do a lot of creative storytelling on your hoof and a lot of improvising. So I can improvise dialogue in my head. And I tell a lot of the stories through dialogue. And the big surprise in writing these books was that, I mean, I've written plays before. I kind of mucked about with writing plays. But there you're telling the whole story through dialogue, but in this case,
Exposition.
well, it's not just that. It's you can kind of expand it. Suddenly, the whole thing becomes yours to deal with, right? You're not doing something that will be handed over and then will be built on by other people, right? Yeah, and it's not collaborative; it's singular. And that was very different for me. So I think in my writing, it mainly comes through in the fact that I have to write about the place, I have to write setting, I have to make sure that I do that kind of descriptive piece, and that's very different from theatre.
Yes.
Yeah.
Interesting. Any other questions? Somebody wait.
Hi.
Hi.
I was so intrigued by you talking about your starting point, that you have a body and a location. How do you write? Do you write forward from that? Or do you then think about how you want to end the book and kind of connect the two? And are you ever surprised by where a book kind of ends up?
I think that's the exciting bit about writing, the surprises, right? I follow my nose. I just follow there's that kind of, it's kind of tried to say that the book writes itself, but the book does write itself. I mean, I basically, if I know where the body is, I'm wondering, who is this? Why are they lying there? And the minute I start asking those questions, it takes me in different directions, and I follow that. And then I write that bit, and that takes me in another direction, and the whole thing is a great big exploration, right? And it's all made up as it goes along. And I never really, I quite often have no idea who the murderer is until very close to the end.
A real whodunit.
Yeah. And sometimes it's kind of okay. Is it this one or is it that one? Yeah. But then, I mean, it's like Doug says, as writers of these stories, we get to make it all up. We get to decide what to do. So, you can, you get to kind of, you get to make the decision and you get to make those choices. One of the big exciting things for me in writing is the fact that I'll sometimes sit down and I think I know what I'm going to write that day. And, 2 pages in, it's going off in a totally different direction. And that's usually the best writing. And it's usually the best ideas that come that way. It's a very kind of subconscious kind of thing.
Do you ever get writer's block?
Not since I started writing these books. Which is interesting. I mean, the day that I do, I guess it's the day I stop. Or the day that I just come to a dead end. I mean, I don't know, it's doesn't happen so why.
Okay.
What?
And you'll have to get another detective.
Well, I have got another detective now. Well, it's just not a detective, but I do have another bunch of characters. I mean, I don't know. I mean, will I ever get to end writing crime fiction? I don't know. I mean, yeah.
I have a question. You were talking about how you have to read aloud. Do you have any audiobooks out?
No, not so far.
Because I would love to have it, because I can't read very well. Like my eyes, I just get headaches and things like that. So I'm doing a lot of audiobooks.
Right.
And I read your first book, and it was a while back, and I always wanted to read some more, but without an audiobook, it's just a little more painful.
I'll pass on the message.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Does anyone else have anything they want to ask? Yeah.
Well,
Jeff?
Roxanne, that's the same thing that happens to us over at Portage Commons. You came and spoke to us, and our people were quite fired up about it. But there are several people there now who keep asking me, when is she going to put them out in audio? We need them in audio, or we need them in large print. That's the other one. Large print is very, very.
You can get them on Kindle. You can get them on Kindle and.
Yeah,
That's not a book. Really? My goodness. How could you say that? The ghost of this corporal or this dead guy is going to come back and haunt you in the next book after saying that. No, I must say that the seniors at Portage Commons, by the way, which used to be called Lions Place, really did appreciate you coming and telling your story there. That was your first book, I believe, wasn't it?
That was the first book.
And we have all of the others, and they are regularly circulating, and there's always people coming back to me and saying, when are you going to get her to come again? I'm thinking now that you've got a new book,
You haven't invited me.
I'll have to read it first, and I'll have to let my reading committee decide if it's up to their standards.
All right. Okay.
Of course, we always have a coffee party afterwards.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we have ladies from the University Women's Club. They have a mystery writers group. Yeah. Anyone else?
I think we have time for one more question if anybody has one. Okay. All right. Well, I think we can move on to the signing portion of the evening then. All right. Thank you so much, everybody here today, for your questions as well.
Thank you.
So yeah, we're going to move on to the signing portion. So the signing's going to be right over here to my right at the signing table. Feel free to have a copy signed before you pay for it. Just so long as you visit the cash desk before you leave, that we would really appreciate it. Thank you again to everybody here, both in person and online, to Doug Whiteway and Mark Drake for hosting, and of course to Raye Anderson. Thank you so much, everyone.